Hi everyone. So today we're going to start talking about um, one of the two major city-states that determined history in ancient Athens, and it's one of my personal favorite lessons to teach. So we're going to get right into it. By the end of this lesson, you will be able to identify the reasons why the Spartans were a unique military society, and analyze the role that society played on the development of these people. So today's life in Sparta, the city-state of Sparta, it is a military society. So since it's a society based on the military, we have to understand why that happened. Between 900 and 600 BCE, Spartan society was developed and created. And this is in response to a slave revolt. The slaves in ancient Sparta specifically vastly outnumber the number of Spartans in Sparta. And right off the bat, right there, you can understand that that is a problem. If a large number of slaves were to try to revolt like they did and overthrow society, they could be successful because they simply outnumber the actual Spartans. So because there was a slave revolt, it led to, once the revolt was put down, once it was defeated by the Spartans, they created this society, this idea where all emphasis is on military strength. If the army is incredibly strong, it doesn't matter if you're outnumbered, you can win no matter what, whether it's against a larger enemy, like we saw with the 300 Spartans at the Battle of Thermopylae, or the number of, thousands more slaves than you have Spartans. If your military is strong enough, if your society is, if each of the men and women in your society, and yes, I said men and women in your society are strong enough, then you will be able to defeat any enemy. So Spartans believed that military power was the way to provide security for their city-state, whether it was, from outside enemies like the Persians, or interior enemies, enemies within the city-state, such as this large slave population. And this was the best military power. A strong military was the best way to provide protection for their people. Okay, and that's really what it all comes down to. All aspects of daily life in ancient Sparta, in that city-state, were dominated by the army. Okay, they didn't have any desire or need for a navy, and you saw at the Battle of Salamis during the Second Persian War that the Athenians had the strong navy, and they have that navy that we'll talk about tomorrow, because they emphasized trade and going other places. The Spartans just didn't have any need for that. A strong land army was all they believed that they needed. And as you do now already, you'll see that they also didn't even believe they needed walls. If your army was strong enough, walls were not needed either. Okay, so let's talk about it. Boys and men in Sparta play the role. Women will not be forgotten, I promise. But boys and men have a specific role in society. So here's a quote from the text. When a boy was born, government officials came to look at him. If he was not healthy, if he did not appear physically healthy, the baby was taken outside of the city and left to die. Healthy boys were trained from an early age to be soldiers. And the idea is this. Sparta produced and literally manufactured soldiers. And if each soldier wasn't strong and healthy physically and mentally, then there was really no point to them. This is an extremely harsh way to view life and death. And society, the society is based on legend where they would throw babies over a cliff if they didn't believe that they were going to grow up to be a strong, healthy Spartan soldier, for whatever reason it might be. Okay? When we examine this, family structure of the Spartans was significantly different than in all other ancient Greek city-states. So the Spartan family was quite different from that of other ancient Greek city-states. The word Spartan has come down to us in history to describe self-denial and simplicity, living simply. And we'll get more to that in a little bit. and how it leads to weakness if you have too many things around you, too many soft things and comforts. This is what Spartan life was all about. Children were children of the state, of the city-state itself, of the government, more than they were children of their own parents. And that's why in the very beginning, they are taken and examined by a government official. Okay? They were raised to be soldiers, loyal to the state, loyal to the city-state of Sparta and in the government in Sparta itself, strong and self-disciplined. And you'll see that self-discipline come up several times in our lesson here today. Okay? So again, a major takeaway here from this piece of text is that these Spartan children, boys especially, are products, manufactured products of this city-state, of this government. They do not belong necessarily. You don't belong to your parent. You belong to the city-state itself, to the government officials, to the king. And you are a commodity. You are a tool of war. That's what they are raised to be. So training for a boy, what it looked like. Physical training, strength. It included swimming, running, jumping, and throwing javelins, which are long, pointy spears. This would also mimic throwing a spear in war. You're not going to see that they were reading and writing and learning things of that nature. The Spartans did not believe there was really any place in society for those sorts of skills, because being able to read or being able to write isn't going to help you win a slave revolt or win a war. Strength and power and being physically well trained as a soldier is what's going to make you be successful. Boys were not given shoes, and even in winter they weren't given very warm clothing. And this was in order to teach them the hardships of military life and what it would be like to be in a war. If you're in a war scenario and you don't have food and you're separated by yourself from the rest of the army and you're in enemy territory and you're starving to death, you need to get food. And therefore they were not given much food as young boys because they were encouraged to steal. However, if you were caught stealing, you were whipped as punishment. And that was because if you were captured in enemy territory as a soldier stealing food, they're going to kill you. And so these Spartan boys were trained that life is very difficult, and it is at all times that you are being trained to be a soldier. They were recreating what it would be like to be in war at all times. They were brainwashed to be soldiers. And at all times, boys were trained that courage, bravery, and strength, physical strength, are the all-important ideals of a good Spartan. And here's an example in the text. One Spartan boy, stole a fox, and he hid this stolen fox under his coat. When he was called out for this, when they said, we believe that you stole a fox, we believe you will be punished for this. Instead of admit that he stole something, he would have rather died. So this youth has a stolen fox hidden under his coat. He allowed it to tear out his very bowels, his organs, with its claws and teeth. And he'd rather die than betray his theft, because if you are caught stealing, it is a death sentence in Sparta, especially in war. And all of this is so that, if you've seen the movie 300, all of this is to create these perfect soldiers, all in line. There's no takeaway. The takeaway here from this image is that there is no individual identity. Okay, they are soldiers. They are mass-produced soldiers. They are not individuals with different thoughts and different desires and things. They are manufactured tools of war. Okay, that is a really big takeaway here. So now we'll examine some more text. Self-discipline and obedience. The Spartans believed that the most important qualities of good soldiers were the qualities of self-discipline and obedience. And we'll examine those two meanings in a minute. To reinforce self-discipline, they required soldiers to live tough lives, free of comforts. For example, the Spartans didn't have luxuries, like soft furniture and expensive food. They thought such comforts were what made people weak. Even the Spartans' enemies admired their discipline and obedience. So what this means is if you're encouraged to become soft, the definition of soft back in ancient Sparta meant you couldn't provide food for yourself, or if you experienced a challenge, you didn't just give up right away. To be quite honest, that's something that everyone can learn. Myself, you as students, sometimes we experience things that are difficult, and it's really easy to give up or just ask for help. We encourage you to ask for help, but not to a fault. We also want you as 7th graders to be young, independent, self-disciplined students, okay? And so that's an ideal that we can admire from the Spartans. And it even says here, and we know this from history, the Spartans' enemies admired their discipline and obedience. And why obedience? Let's examine what this means. Start down here. Obedience is following an order or a law. Like I said, they produce soldiers, tools of war. Following a law, or specifically an order, is what it's all about. If they tell you to, if 300 Spartans are told to fight 150,000 Persians, you're probably not going to be successful. You're probably going to lose your life, but you should be honored to lose your life and not to feel as though you're scared. You know, they were taught not to sense fear or fear being hurt. Okay? Self-discipline is the ability to control your feelings and overcome weakness. Both self-discipline and obedience, as you can see, are ideals. They're the characteristics of a strong, independent soldier, and that's what the Spartans wanted. Let's examine life in Sparta for these boys and when it starts. So, between the ages of 7 and 12, what this means is Spartan boys were taken from their parents at the age of 7 to begin their military training. And from the ages of 7 and 12, the values of training are taught to them. They leave home and they got a basic education, but this education is not reading and writing. This basic education is the physical training and obedience and self-discipline that we talked about, strength and courage. Between the ages of 12 and 18, the physical training gets more difficult. Boys develop physical skills through exercise and the physical skills of being a soldier. Between the ages of 18 and 20, they receive their specific military training. Men learn how to fight as part of the army, which you'll see right here. This is called a phalanx in the background of King Leonidas here, where each man keeps each other safe with their shield over and around each other. They protect one another, and they're shoulder to shoulder here, showing the ability, the strength. Each soldier is only as strong as the soldier to his left and to his right. And they'll learn that from the ages of 18 and 20. From the ages of 20 to 30 is their military service. Soldiers they form the body of the Spartan army. Again, what you're viewing right here, the Spartan army. Okay? And then at age 30, they finally earn the right of full citizenship. Soldiers can participate in the assembly, which is their government, and they can move back home and get married. Men are soldiers. They remain in the army until the age of 60 years old, which is incredibly long. But every soldier able-bodied, every able-bodied man in Sparta was a soldier. But we have women here as well. And the next thing that you'll do is examine a small piece of the text explaining what life for women was like in Sparta. It was not as harsh in other city-states because men were often off at war and women had to be strong at home and run the city-state itself. And so they had actually more rights, and you'll see what that's like.